Hello and welcome back to Bicycle Legs and another edition of Rush. Bicycle Legs discovers Rush. With me today, I have the wonderful Peter Kerr, fellow Australian from the great channel Rock Daydream Nation. How are you doing tonight, Peter?
Good, and how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. It's been a very busy day, but I'm looking forward to doing this show. So this is the second episode in this series. For those of you who haven't seen the first one that I did with Grant Arthur from Grant's Rock Warehouse, there's a playlist, so you can go and have a look at that if you want to. Basically, just to give you a quick overview again, I'm new to this band. For some reason, they passed me by. Well, it was because I was given one album of theirs like 10, 12 years ago, and it just didn't resonate with me. And then I found out on the Contrarians, where Peter and I both met, that a lot of people consider it the worst Rush album of all. So I thought I had to give this band another chance. I'm hooking in some of my friends from various other channels to give me Rush albums as a homework assignment, and I'm going and listening to them and giving my thoughts. So I'll throw it over to you, Peter, to tell everyone the album that you gave me, a little bit about it, and why you gave me that album as the homework assignment.
No worries, and thanks for having me on your channel. Thank you. Right, well, the album that I've chosen is the 12th studio album from Rush, and it's 1987, Hold Your Fire. So there, it's a bit flary up. I'll get it there. There you go.
There we go.
So this was the came out in 1987, and am I still here?
Yep.
Okay. It was produced by Peter Collins, and it was in the middle of a synth period with Rush. So Rush were on a bit of a run of very synth, new wave sounding albums. Preceding that was Power Windows. Then you had Hold Your Fire. It was the reason why I chose this for you, Bicycle Legs, is because you're a connoisseur of new wave, and I thought that, okay, you've had a bit of a sample of the Rush when they were in that sort of proggy rock guitar-based sound. I'd like to expose your musical palette to a little bit of Rush when they are in their new wave. And you can't get any more new wave or synth pop than Hold Your Fire. You know, basically my entry point to Rush was the 80s Rush. Power Windows, Grace Under Pressure was the first album that I ever bought by Rush on a little cassette. And I was hooked because it sounded very similar to bands that I loved and I used to listen to on the radio in Australia, like Police. Even, you know, a little bit of Simple Minds with the guitar tone, but with a little bit of a harder edge and really interesting lyrics. So Grace Under Pressure, Power Windows, and then Hold Your Fire. And I became a fan, and I was just going in all different directions, moving with each album and then going back into the back catalogue. And I can tell you, when I went back to that 70s catalogue and going to albums like Fly By Night or 2112, completely different sonics to, you know, the 80s and Power Windows and Hold Your Fire. So, yeah, I thought this would be a nice little palette cleanser for you, knowing that, you know, you love your new wave.
Yeah, I definitely do.
And throwing a little bit of the 80s. Just a few little stats, and then maybe you can sort of lead it off from there. This album hit number 10 in the UK charts. US, it went to number 12. It went gold status. And in Canada, number 9. So I wouldn't say it was a moving pictures blockbuster, but it was steady. And they were still a very much a major draw card touring act around the Americans and in the UK as well. So, yep, that's the background.
Enough. Thank you. Just as a little sort of sidebar, how did you sort of first discover that first Grace Under Pressure? Because I mean, Rush were, as I said in my first episode, they were a band that were never popular here in Australia. They They really were. Sort of passed us by. And so I'd be interested to know how you actually sort of first came into contact with the band musically.
Well, in the retail, in the record chains like Brash's, Parlings, and their names that you're probably familiar with, they still had their records, but in the bargain bins.
Yeah.
So do you remember when, in the front of a record store, Bicycle Legs, you'd have the an assortment of all these different cassettes, and it'd be, you could do 3 for $20. That's how I picked up a Rush.
Oh, fair enough.
And that's how I got hooked. So yeah, just buying one of those 3/4s. But even, one of the joys of going to a record shop is perusing albums and looking at album covers and wondering, is this going to, what's the music behind this? Is it worth investigating? And I must admit, I did come across a lot of Rush albums. But yeah, look, nothing in the media, nothing on radio. If they came to the country, they would barely be arrested. There was just zero presence.
Exactly.
And, what ruled in Australia in that day? Pub rock and probably a bit of new wave.
Yeah, fair enough too. But so let's get into the album. We'll go through it track by track, and I'll give my sort of thoughts on each song, and then you can sort of give me a little bit of what you like about each song. Okay, so let's start at the beginning with the first track, and that's Force 10. And I said that this, as you were saying, right from the get-go, this definitely has more of an 80s sound right from the start. I thought it was a really, really good album opener. And I also said definitely more than Permanent Waves, which was the first album that Grant gave me. This definitely has a real new wave feel to it. And I thought the song has really great momentum as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think it's one of the my favourite album openers for Rush, especially in that 80s period. And I have to say something about Rush in the 80s. They have great album openers. You've got this real big operatic opening. You've got the synth percussion. It's sort of like sounds like a pump, like a petrol pump. A little bit of a laugh, which happens to be Amy Mann. More about her later. From Till Tuesday. You've got Neil Peart and the shuffle drums, and then you've got this really classic up-tempo Geddy Lee bass, and he is really just thumping those strings. And then comes into Alex his beautiful linear guitar work. So I think it's a great album opener, and it's one of the few songs that Neil Peart's had a co-write with Pi Dubois. So I think it's a really, really good song. And another thing I like about this song is when it goes into this chorus, it's a really dreamy chorus where it goes, look into the eye of the storm, look out for the force without form. It's sort of like, really ethereal, takes you away. And that's the thing about Rush in the 80s. Musically, it goes in all different directions. You think it's going to go in a really straight line, but then it'll take a left turn. And they still have those prog influences, even in the 80s, very much so. But more in a new wave sort of soundscape.
Yeah. No, it definitely was probably one of the 3 or 4 tracks I liked the best on this album. So the second track is Time Stands Still. And the very first thing I wrote with this is, with Amy Mann on vocals. I love her.
Do I? I love her too.
Just as a little side note, I have these, tis the season, as it were, getting close to Christmas. And I have these compilations that I've made for myself of like non-traditional Christmas music, like rock songs and what have you. I've got a couple of Amy Mann songs on there, and they're just absolutely gorgeous. But
she's the bomb. I love her.
Yeah, no, I love her too. I said that this song, very commercial sounding, and I asked, you may know this, was it a single?
Yes, it was. And Bicycle Legs. It's the only song I've ever heard played on commercial radio in Australia. That is the only Rush song. They played it on Triple M and blew me away.
Oh, okay. I don't remember hearing it, but I really, really liked it.
Yeah.
So I did say that it's a good song, but I'm getting the feeling with this album that they're not quite as adventurous musically as they were, say, on Permanent Waves. They're definitely going for a more stripped down commercial sort of sound.
Yeah. I call this the spiritual album because the thing that's really strong all the way through the 80s and gets even stronger and more mature is Neil Peart's
the lyric
writing. He is the great humanist. He just writes observational lyrics about the human character. And look, the more I listen to Rush, the more I'm amazed how masterful his lyric writing is. And even if the musicology may be not top notch, the lyrics are fantastic.
Yeah, well,
and something so simple as this is still up there.
Well, I think I mentioned in the first episode that I did with Grant that Neil Peart's lyrics are never banal.
No.
You know, there's always something, you know, they're not, you know, really trite and what have you. They're always, I like his lyrics a lot. So
So the only thing I want to say is Amy Mann, Blubber.
Yeah.
Till Tuesday, and to your viewers, check out her solo work.
Oh yeah.
She's divine. And she has really carved a niche for herself in the indie world. Hasn't really, I mean, she was on major labels, but has gone the indie route. And she is just a great singer-songwriter. But in this song, they had it in their minds that they wanted a female perspective, and big tick for them to do that. You know, for a band of that type, you couldn't really think of many acts that would put a female voice or a singer like Amy Mann. And I think that, that's a huge tick. I like the lyrics in this song. It's like attitude to life and letting it wash by without appreciating it.
Yeah.
Great humanist lyrics.
So the next song is Open Secrets. And my notes on this, I said, there's really good playing on this song, but again, it's a quite commercial 80s sounding song musically. I actually noted that the production sounds a little bit like Yes's 1987 album, Big Generator, but I love the guitar solo on this song. Really, really good.
I love Alex's tone on this guitar. It sounds like Charlie Burchill. And I've said that for I've done a lot of shows on Rush and the 80s Rush on my channel, but I've always referred to Charlie Burchill. He's got that beautiful, rich tone on the guitar, and it's just all over this song. I find this, his tone's quite haunting. This is a very melancholy song. I have a little bit of sadness. Geddy's bass is just busy and funky. And I love the sentiment of this, the lyrics, where it's like people going through life where they have problems, but they don't address it and they just carry on. Like the lyric in it, like where I guess we all have these feelings we can't leave unreconciled. I just think it's a really, really strong lyric. And no, it's a great song, but it's emotional. And there's a bit of sadness in it. Bit of melancholy.
So the last song on side one is Prime Mover. And I sort of
Second Nature, isn't it?
Oh, sorry. We did miss one. Sorry, Second Nature. I skipped one. Can't read my own handwriting. I said this was a very 80s sounding ballad, but it picks up in the choruses. This song is, it's okay, but it really probably my least favorite song on the album. So
again, the lyrics strong. To fight the fire, we're feeding the flame. It's very anthemic. It's powerful. There's a little bit of explosiveness, but it's very much of its time, I guess. So I grant you that. It's, there are certain songs, there's a lot of the songs on this album, in my view, that are timeless, but this is more of that time.
Yeah. So having gotten ahead of myself, we do get on to Prime Mover now. And I said that this song tries to be a bit more moody than the rest of side one. But it still has that real sort of mid to late 80s, what I call a post-prog sound to it. If you know what I mean, the sort of bands, you know, like Yes and Genesis and all that sort of thing, they had that sort of particular sort of production that they did in their sort of post-prog period. And I did note again that the lyrics on this song are really, really good. And that also there's some great bass playing on this song. Absolutely wonderful.
Absolutely. With Russia, I find that in this song, you've got Geddy and Alex really tight. They're like a unit and they're feeding off each other. You've got the bass and the guitar. And then you've got the drums.
Yeah.
Doing his own things, and he's doing his fills in between. So they're working out their parts, and Alex and Neil is very intuitive, and he's just putting his fills in between. And I think this makes this a really, really good song. And I like the sentiments of the lyric. The point of the journey is not to arrive. Anything can really happen. It's emotional. It's got a lot of energy. I think it's a lot of people's favorite songs off the album. So I think it's a very strong closer track. And,
yeah, well, I think,
you know, song listing, you know, it's a good,
absolutely.
Good
I think that side one really opens and closes really, really well, I think. Probably the two strongest songs on side one are the first and the last one for me anyway. So we get on to side two and we have Lock and Key. And again, I said this is another good side opener, just like Force 10 is. And I said this has a bit more of the mood and drama I was expecting from Rush after having listened to Permanent Waves. Does still sound of its time though. And I also said with this song that the band are really showing their chops. So like all three of them.
Yep, you'd be spot on. They're showing their chops. There's a bit of Police in it if you listen to the guitar, because they were very much influenced by the Police, even with their rhythms, you know, like the semi-reggae, but not in this particular song. I like the lyrics. Like it's basically saying that human beings have a killer instinct, but most of us keep it under lock and key. Powerful lyrics. Again, it goes back to Neil's humanist observations of life. And I think it's a real, it's a fine opening. And Rush have this knack of opening and closing tracks. You know, it's punch, real power.
So the next song is Mission. And I said that much like Lock and Key, this one has more of the sort of Rush sound I was expecting, but with that very mid-80s sound. And I wondered if that sort of 80s sound had anything to do with the producer, Peter Collins, because I know he worked with a lot of 80s artists. You know, in particular, I remember him working with Nick Kershaw, which is not an artist you would expect to sort of be associated with Rush. But I love Nick Kershaw, by the way. But so I was wondering if his production might have given it that sort of 80s sound. And I also noted that there's a really nice proggy bit in the middle of this song, which I rather liked.
Wouldn't it be good to be in your shoes? No, I love Nick too. Got a soft spot for Nick. I love this song. I think it's great. It's lush. There's a lot of synth lines in this album that are really lush. A lot of grandeur. It's just like a big cinemascape type of sound, and this is one of them. It's emotional. There's melancholy. I just love the lyrics, and yes, I agree. There's a little bit of a jam workout, because what's a Rush album when they don't have a little bit of a jam workout? And
Yeah,
I would imagine I'd love to be a fly on the wall in the studio when they do these little takes, and it sort of sounds like they're letting loose. It's not really
yeah,
structured, because some of the Rush songs are very structured, because I know Neil was very, very precise in regards to certain songs where he would map out the drum patterns and when he'd be doing it. But this one sounds like they're really sort of looking at each other, because if you're playing in a band and you're a trio, they're sort of intuitive. They're very intuitive.
yeah,
And that's the things with wonderful power trios, ZZ Top, Police, Rush. If you play and you're on stage or in that environment, or playing quite loose in a studio, just a look or a glance, all right, you're taking it in that direction. And that's what I feel in this song,
yeah.
That's
Well,
what are the songs where they're really kind of cutting loose.
Well, they've been playing together for nearly 15 years by this stage. So
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
so they really would have had a bit of that sort of telepathy going on by this stage.
Absolutely. But I think it's one of the strongest tracks on the album. I love it.
Yeah,
It's fine.
Now the next song is Turn the Page. And the very first thing I wrote about this song was, now this I like.
Bicyclelegs. It's my favorite song on the album.
Well, there you go. I said it's in 6/4, which is a nice proggy time signature. At least the verses are. It goes into 4/4 for the choruses, but and it gives it a real sort of momentum that carries the song. I love 6/4. I think it's a really good time signature for getting that sort of perpetual motion kind of feel to a song. I said I love the instrumental middle section, especially the quiet bit building tension.
Yeah, I mean, nothing can survive in a vacuum. I love that urgent bass riff. A lot of the songs just start off with a really urgent bass riff. It's like Geddy's like the bandmaster, and he just starts off. I read an interesting thing about his playing on this album. He was shown by somebody, and apologies, I forget the name, to play bass chords. And he tried a different sort of finger picking technique in regards to bass. So that's why when you listen to this album, the bass is even more out there and more prominent. And he was trying a different sort of style. But I wrote with this, it starts off this urgent bass riff and this beautiful counterpoint guitars with Alex Lifeson, and he's so underrated. And I've said this in all my shows with Tim Derling, etc., that he's the most underrated guitarist in rock. You listen to what he does, it's what he doesn't do that makes him such a valuable part of this band. And I think his guitar work is just divine. But it's got a lot of sweeping grandeur. I just love the melodies. And I think it's Pete's pick for the my favorite track on the album. I love it.
Well, I think we might be in agreement there. I actually mentioned to Grant when we did the first show that when I was sort of listening to Rush for the very first time, I was expecting Alex Lifeson to be a real sort of shreddy guitar player, and he's not. And I really like that he's not. He's a much more tasteful guitar player, and I really enjoyed that.
And I know you love tasteful guitarists. You don't like shredders. He is in your wheelhouse, my friend.
Well, yeah. Well, my favorite guitar player of all time is Robert Fripp. So,
but he'll do a chord. He'll do chord progressions. He'll just play rhythm. He just knows to fill in the gaps and where to come in and where not to. But he can riff it. He can solo like any others when he has to.
No, he's a good soloist, but he's not a Swarm of Bees kind of soloist, if you know what I mean.
No, and he's not super uber flashy, but it's what he does. He just does really well.
Yeah, well, I like guitarists like that. So
yeah.
So where are we up to? Tai Sham.
Oh dear.
I said this one has an East Asian feel, at the beginning of as the title would suggest, I felt a little cultural appropriation-y. I don't know. I said the song is moody and atmospheric. I actually think it's a better ballad than Second Nature, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's cheese. I really think
Yeah.
it's just. I go on a holiday to China and I'll put some sort of Asian chord structures and look, they had all the best intentions, but I think even in their later career, when they look back at that, they probably went, it's not one of the best. I'm sure we might get some comments going, how dare you say that? But it's not one of my favorites, and I love Rush.
Yeah.
It's not top shelf.
No,
But
fair enough.
strange enough, I've played this album and that bloody Tai Shan has been in my head. So there's some earworm melodies in it.
Yes.
Rightly or wrongly.
I've got to say there's 2 ballads on this album and there was 1 ballad on Permanent Waves. And I've got to say, I think I like Rush better when they're faster. I'm not so far a big fan of their ballads, and I'm glad they don't do a lot of them. But there might be other albums that completely change my mind about that. So we'll see as the series goes on.
Yep.
The other thing I said when I was listening to this song is so far I'm liking side 2 a fair bit better than side 1. But that's just me.
Yeah. It's got some strong tracks.
Yeah. So the last song is High Water. I really, really like the drums and percussion on this one. It's like there's a drum riff going on and then there's some percussion overdubs on the top of it, which really, really, I really like. It's another atmospheric track to close the album. And I said this is possibly my second favorite song on the album after Turn the Page. And I thought the guitar solo on this song was slightly Floydy, a bit Dave Gilmour-y. Like
Right.
not in the tone, but in the sort of notes that he was playing.
I get that.
You know, one of the things I love about Gilmour as a player is, again, he's not a shredder. You know, he will play 3 notes where another guitarist might play 20. And I feel like I get that sort of vibe to this solo from Alex. And that's why I really, really like it. So, yeah, another great solo.
Yeah. Well, I was reading the comments on YouTube because I like reading people's comments on video clips, and somebody summed this up really perfectly. And it's saying it's like great music playing to the credits of a great movie. So it's a great conclusion song.
It is.
And I really think that encapsulates the song. I think, it's a great closer. Lyrically, I love it. Talks about human relationship with the lake or the ocean or in water in general. So I think it's a very spiritual album, this. And Neil's got an incredibly inquisitive mind. His lyrics are highly intellectual, but not intellectual that it's just, it's over your head.
Yeah.
You can interpret it.
Yeah, and they're good lyrics. They've got depth to them, but they're not the sort of vanishing up your own butt sort of thing.
Yes. Where which the very worst of prog has those tendencies.
Oh yes. I mean, I adore Yes, but I will never understand what the hell John Anderson is on about 3/4 of the time.
Yes.
So
what can you say? But I think they did a contrarian show on this as a dark horse album, and I couldn't make the show, but I wrote a little spiel, and I said that this album, in my view, was previously a lot of their songs were very intellectual.
Yeah.
Very intellectual. But this album and a lot of the songs hit the right tone where it had heart. Yeah. So it wasn't just stirring the mind, but it was actually stirring the heart as well. Yeah. And I think it's a great closer. So
that's a good observation. My overall feelings of the album, I've got to say, this is quite different from Permanent Waves to me in two ways. One, obviously, the sound of the album is quite different. A lot synthier, a lot, as you say, sort of new wavy in parts. Although I less sort of think new wave, and as I said, the sort of term I came up with was that sort of post-prog sound. The other way it was different for me, I've got to admit, is that Permanent Waves grabbed me first listen. Like, it just snared me in, and it's like, wow, I need to listen to more of this band. This album, when I first listened to it, I liked it, but I didn't love it. But as I listened to it a few more times, it's definitely one I think that grows on me.
Yes.
And I think it's one that, as I listen to it more and more, it'll, sort of slowly climb the rankings, as it were.
Absolutely. The penny will drop. Not that the penny hasn't dropped, but it'll become, and that makes it more rewarding, because I find that there are some albums that have instant gratification. And this is a whole topic we could just talk about, but instant gratification albums, and then you fall out of love with it.
Yeah.
It's like having that sugar hit, that cupcake, and wow. And then you kind of get bored. But some of the albums where it's like a slow build and you've got to listen to it again and again and again.
Yeah.
They last.
The other thing, I've got a question for you that I sort of had from just listening to these first couple of Rush albums, and that is, I don't understand why people have a problem with Geddy Lee's voice. Was it more of like his voice in the 70s, and then he kind of streamlined it in the 80s a bit more? Or like, I understand why people have, John Anderson, again, going back to the Yes thing, people can't handle, how high his vocals are. And I guess Geddy has a little bit of that going with it.
I think he sings really well in the 80s. I think his voice definitely got better. And around the time of Presto and in the 90s, his vocals were sublime, whether he was getting vocal coaching or he was working on it. But there was definitely a difference between young Geddy and middle-aged, more mature Geddy.
Yeah.
And I think maybe he's taking care of his voice. And let's face it, a lot of that early stuff was prototype Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
Okay, prototype Led Zeppelin with a bit of prog. And do as your peers do a Robert Plant and go for the sky, scream like a banshee. That's what he was doing. But then when their career got deeper into the discography and they would take, I guess he was using his song, his voice as another instrument of the band, virtually the fourth instrument of the band, and realised maybe I'm going to look for different tones and take it down a notch. But I've heard that a lot.
Yeah. The only other observation that I had with this album that I said, except for a few notable spots, I thought Alex Lifeson was a little restrained on this album.
Probably
there's a few solos where he really lets loose, but other than that, maybe just because it's a lot more synthy than
I've got I watched a show with Martin Popoff and Pete Pardo, and they were talking about reviewing records and albums, and Martin came, I think somebody told him, and he agreed with this: when you listen to an album, listen to it 4 or 5 times. Listen to the singing, listen to the guitar, listen to the bass, and listen to the drums.
Yeah.
So what you do is you listen to the record and you just focus on one instrument. And I think, I don't know, maybe I think Alex is like a Trojan horse, because there's a lot of things where you think he's not doing much, but if you listen to it again and you put the headphones, because Rush is a really good headphones band, you hear a lot of things that he's doing and you go, wow, okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't actually hearing that when I had it on the speakers. So I think, you may think he's a bit restrained, but I think when you listen to it, there's a bit happening.
Fair enough. I mean, I've only had probably 4 or 5 listens to the album so far, and the more I was getting, as you say, the more I was getting into, like, sort of getting into the grits of it, that's when I started liking the album more. The first time, when I listen to an album for the first time, I like to just listen to it, not do anything else, not try and analyze it or whatever, just let it enter my ears. And that's sometimes why albums like this are a bit more of a slow burn for me, because they do tend to reveal their secrets more when you are listening sort of to very precise parts of it, rather than just listening to it as a whole. So
yeah, absolutely. But I think it's got a lot of rewards on the album, and it's one that just got to give it a bit of a go. But hey, this whole exercise of yours, it's a big catalogue, and it's going to be way rewarding. I can tell you, it's a wonderful journey to go through.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to exploring more of the catalogue. Although for my next episode in this series, we will be staying in the 80s. I'll be having Todd Evans on, and he's going to be giving me Power Windows.
Well, there you go. He's in the same wheelhouse as me, so it's not too. Yeah, there you go. That's a goodie. Yep.
I'm looking forward to that. So there you have it, everyone. Those are my thoughts and Peter's thoughts on Rush's Hold Your Fire. Thank you so much for giving me this album and
my pleasure
recommending it. I've really enjoyed sort of listening to it and analyzing it. And as I say, definitely, I think a grower on me, this one. So thank you, everyone, for watching. Please do like, share, and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I've got everything playlisted. So there's a playlist for this. There's a playlist for my studio albums ranked shows. There's a playlist for my In Defense Of, etc., etc. Please, if you are not already subscribed to Peter's channel, Rock Daydream Nation, and I can't believe that I have that many viewers who aren't, but if you're not, go over there right now and subscribe. He's got a ton of wonderful content. I've been lucky enough to be on his channel about half a dozen times, I think.
Yeah, we have.
So please go and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation as well. I will leave a link in the description so you can go and do that. If you ever want to see the shows that I do on other people's channels, the appearances that I make, I do have a playlist for those as well. So go to my playlist page, and there's one that's called Appearances on Other Channels. You'll see where I've been on Peter's channel before, and you can look at some of those episodes. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram and Twitter. On Instagram, I'm mostly posting the records I happen to be listening to at the time, as well as posting channel updates. On Twitter, I talk about anything and everything, but I am definitely trying to give that more of a music focus. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
See you later.